Yeah, so now there are many different areas of men's issues that the group focuses on, but what would be the main ones that you primarily target?
Yeah, we focus on 7 key social areas: domestic abuse, family law, education, male suicide, false accusations, homelessness, and unjust laws. These are the areas that we focus on primarily. But underpinning all of these areas is the fact that there is no national representative body which would speak and advocate for men and boys across all these different areas. This is crucial. This is essential when legislation is being discussed, that before Oireachtas committees, it is essential to have a body which represents men and which can speak on behalf of men and boys at these Oireachtas committees. It is also important that to have such a body to address the media on issues of concern to men and boys, and to point out areas where the legislation does not favour men. These are all important things. By the way, I should point it out that every other interest group in the state has a national representative body, which is state funded, which has regular access to the media, and some of these groups actually have several, but all except men. They don't have any.
Alright, so now we're going to get into the different areas that Men's Voices Ireland focus on in a bit more detail. So first off, I want to talk about male victims of domestic violence. So first off, what is the current situation regarding male victims of domestic violence in Ireland?
Well, first, let me make a general comment which cuts across all these areas. The situation across all these areas is bad, full stop. But in the case of domestic abuse, the services for men are absolutely pathetic. There is only one national, there's no national service. There's only one group which attempts to provide a national service, and that is Men's Aid. In 2021, Men's Aid got exactly 1% of the funding which was provided by TUSLA for these services. 1%. There is no service in the Dublin area. There is one call centre in Navan, which is supposed to serve the country. The amount of money that, as I say, is available is extremely low, and it doesn't allow for Men's Aid to provide anything like a proper service. There are no shelters for men as well, and the official attitude is that domestic violence is something perpetrated by men and women are the victims, whereas the overwhelming evidence worldwide is that this is simply false. Domestic violence is perpetrated at similar levels by men and women across virtually all the countries in which services have been done. But this is not recognised by the state, nor is it recognised by the media, which is overwhelmingly negative.
Yeah, and I think it's not just a negative attitude towards in the media towards male victims. It's also kind of a societal attitude. Like there have been several social experiments where they've shown a man beating up a woman in public and a woman beating up a man, and yet like people always intervene to stop it when a woman is being beaten. Yet people you've seen it on some of these that they've started laughing at when a man is being beaten, and some even actually take their phones out and start filming. So it's not just in the media; it's also like society in general. So I think there's a lot of work that really needs to go into dealing with that. So what does Men's Voices Ireland what do they wish to see happen to improve the situation?
Well, we want to see a proper national service set up, which is properly funded, and which has call centres in all the cities and the major towns. We also want to see these centres funded on a par with those which are at present serving women. We want to see shelters for male victims set up across the country, and which are on a par with those provided for women. There must also be a recognised national agency which represents men before Oireachtas committees on issues of domestic violence, and which is empowered to speak to the media on these issues.
Okay, so the next area is a pretty big one, so we won't be able to go too much into detail on it, and that is family law. So what's the current situation in general with regard to family law in Ireland?
It's bad. In family law, the 1995 Act provides that a man can be removed from the home when divorce or separation occurs, and that he will struggle thereafter to both maintain himself financially and to be able to maintain a good relationship, a meaningful relationship with his children. A report on family law reform was made by the Oireachtas Justice Committee in 2019, to which Men's Voices contributed. But this report has not been implemented in law, and the situation continues to be bad. And there has been no cross-party support to have this reform carried out in law. So the situation remains, the report remains in limbo. There has been no attempt to put the recommendations into legislation, and there's been no call to do so either.
So when you say like it hasn't received cross-party support, why hasn't it, do you think?
Why hasn't it?
Why hasn't that legislation received cross-party support?
Because it's an extremely sensitive piece of legislation. It was formulated, Family Law Reform Act was formulated in the late 90s and even earlier, with the cooperation, with the mostly by women's groups, and they don't want to see this legislation undone at this point.
So what does Men's Voices Ireland want to see change with regard to family law? I know there's a lot of areas, but in kind of general, what needs to happen?
A radical reform of family law needs to be carried out, which goes beyond the recommendations of the Oireachtas report of 2019. There must be proper provision for equal and joint parenting made between the two parties, and there must also be an equitable division of the family resources when a settlement is finally being made. That requires the striking out of Section 10 of the Family Law Act 1995. And what needs to be put in place is an alternative dispute resolution system which borrows from best practice, which is now best practice in a number of countries. There is also another factor which needs to be emphasized. That is the crucial role of the father in the lives of his children. This is absolutely essential that this be taken into account, because the role of father has not been properly recognized in the legislation, and it is particularly important for boys.